It's a great turnout. We've always known that Powell River is a caring community, but child poverty is a tough topic, right? It's the kind of thing you don't want to think about. You wish it wasn't there. On a personal level, you can't do a whole lot about it. So we're really pleased to see the turnout tonight, and we have 5 city councillors, I think, here, and Rachel Blaney. Where are you, Rachel? There you are. Rachel's here. My name is Murray Dobb. I'm with Powell River Voices. And it's a little unusual for us to be doing this. I mean, we are not an anti-poverty organization. We know that there are dozens of people in this town who are either working as volunteers or working as staff or agencies that deal with various aspects of child poverty. And we salute all those people. And we know, as they know, that the resources are never enough. They're running as fast as they can. And it's very hard to keep up. So, I mean, we want to acknowledge all that work, but what Powell River Voices does, or tries to do anyway, is we're sort of a civic literacy and civic engagement organization. We try to make it as easy as possible for citizens to be citizens. And often that's not so easy. It's not easy to inform yourself on all the issues that matter to you and matter to the community. So basically that's what we're trying to do tonight, is to just bring this issue sort of back into the light. It's not as if we don't know it exists, but we often don't know the details, and we've left sheets on the table with just some of the aspects of child poverty. And of course in Powell River, if you looked at some of the posters we put up, almost 1 in 4 children in Powell River live in poverty. That's really tough. You know, it's really hard to imagine that every 4th kid you see in Powell River lives in a family that is poor. And of course, lots of poor families are not on social assistance. There's lots of poor families who have parents who work full time, and they still live in poverty because the living wage in this town is around $21. So all of those things, we need to think about those. We need to think about how expensive childcare is. We need to realize, and we know how difficult it is to get affordable housing. So all those things are out there. What we want to try and do tonight is a little different than usual. I mean, Powell River Voices has brought in lots of speakers over the last few years, and they've always been interesting speakers, and people usually enjoy the evening, but then nothing happens, right? That's the problem is the problem of follow-up. What do we do with this new knowledge that we've gained by listening to a speaker? So what we want to try and do tonight is to take it a step further. We want to say, well, what can we actually do as Powell River, as city council, as social movement organizations, NGOs, government agencies, all the people who are working. Maybe we could take it a step further. I mean, take childcare, for example. We've been waiting for 20 years for childcare from the federal level, and it just never seems to come. Well, do we wait another 20 years? Maybe we could actually focus on that as a concrete thing that this town could say, okay, we're not waiting anymore. We're going to do it ourselves. So that's the kind of thing we would like to come out of this evening with, is something that we could focus on. And obviously this is just the beginning of the conversation, but take it on in a way that we haven't done before, perhaps. So the structure of the evening, we're going to have our wonderful panel speak, and then after that, we're going to break into 5 tables, looking at 5 different aspects of this issue: childcare, housing, food security, education, and social cohesion, which is sort of a broad term, meaning how do we reclaim the community in a way? I mean, I think in the last 20 years, there's been a real decline in the strength of communities. I don't think that Powell River suffers from that as much as some places, but how do we build stronger neighborhoods? How do we ensure that those people living in poverty are not isolated from the rest of us? So that's one of the other topics. So after the panel speaks, rather than a Q&A, which I sort of hate giving up because those are always interesting, but we're going to break into 5 groups, and people can pick the group that they are most interested in. And we're going to have these, and we'll have resource people at each of these groups, and we will try to come up with some actual things that we could do rather than just leave tonight being informed. So, that's very long, I'm sorry. So our guests tonight are Adrienne Montani. She is the provincial coordinator of First Call, the BC Child and Youth Advocacy Coalition. She was the former child and youth advocate for the City of Vancouver. She's received awards for her work on behalf of children and youth from the United Way, the Federation of Community Social Services of BC, and the Federation of BC Youth in Care Networks. She came in today on not so much a plane as a roller coaster from Vancouver. So she survived that, which is really good. We also have Lyn Adamson. Lyn, after a career in the corporate world, moved into the social sector area where she relocated to Fort St. John in 1992 and started running an employment center there. Lyn and her partner happily relocated to Powell River in 2000 and have enjoyed everything the town has to offer since then, from the scenery to the culture and fantastic people. Lyn managed CareerLink until 2014, when she took on the role of executive director of the PrEP Society, PRDI Society. And Russell Brewer, who is a politician and a member of City Council.
You didn't write your bio.
So he needs no introduction. It means first.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you for having me up to Powell River. I haven't been here in a while, so it's great, and I'm really interested in my time here tonight, and I'm coming up again later in April to listen more than I talk, to hear about what's working for you on the ground or not working and stuff, and how we can work together. I mean, I work at a provincial level with a coalition that works on child and youth policy advocacy, primarily at the provincial and sometimes the federal level, because it needs to go there too. But tonight I know we're talking about the municipal level, so we'll see what we can do there. But so what I thought I'd do quickly is, in my time, is I'm going to review some child and family poverty stats and income inequality stats. Don't need to take notes. They're all come from, I didn't bring full copies. This is available online, so on First Call, actually the website is still 1 in 5, using the numeral, still 1 in 5. There's a big long report we produce every year, the annual child poverty report card for the province, and there's a 4-page version, the summary, that should be on your table, but if not, there's more in the back there. So every stat probably that I quote is either there or on the website, so you don't need to take notes. I know numbers go right like this with me if somebody says them to me. But so as Mary said, we have 1 in 4 children poor here in Powell River. In the province, it's 1 in 5. That's in the province. That's 168,000 children, just to put it in some context. And we use the analogy in the report that would fill Disneyland 8 times or something like that. So just to get an idea of the scope of the problem, and that Powell River's child poverty rate is higher than the provincial average and the Canadian average. It has gone up. So we have on the website, you can see stats for the regional district. So there it's 26%, so that's the 1 in 4 almost, up from 25% the previous year. Or Powell River's census metropolitan area, more the local area. That's 23%. So that's about 640 children in your community, 0 to 17. Then we also look at young children's poverty, because we know child poverty, I'm going to get into this a bit, has some real impacts on child growth and development and opportunity. And so we really should care even more about really young kids during that crucial time of brain development, social development, human development. And their poverty rates in this community are 6% higher than the overall child poverty rate. So the 0 to 5 poverty rate is even higher. It's 29%. That's almost getting close to a third of kids, young kids. Something I think you might want to be worried about. So overall, some things to think about when we look at child poverty rates. One, child poverty rates, not only are the young kids higher than the overall kids, but the child poverty rates for children are higher than the overall population poverty rate. So what does that say about how we treat our children? What does it say about how we support young families in particular, or families with children 0 to 17? It says that there's some systemic failures there around supports for families, and that we allow that particular population to be more poor than the rest of the population. And then those overall numbers kind of mask the overrepresented populations underneath there. So there are, and one of them that stands out, you'll notice it in the report card, so children who live with single parents have a 1 in 2 chance of being poor in this province. 50%, actually 50.3%. Absolutely astounding, shocking number. So what does that say? This isn't saying anything about single parent, and that's mostly single mothers. That includes some dads, but it's actually about 80% single mothers. So what does that say about what's happening for women raising children on their own, primarily women? What's it saying about a single parent family? For whatever reason they're single parents. There's illness, death, divorce, non-marriage, there's a whole range of reasons. So what does it say about the way we support families and those children and their rights? Because we are signatories to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. We guarantee supposedly that children will have adequate food and adequate education and adequate shelter and all those basics that we should all be able to take for granted in a very wealthy country and in wealthy communities. And yet so many kids are not getting those rights are not respected. So, and other groups that are overrepresented in the child poverty stats would be Aboriginal, First Nations, both on and off reserve communities for sure. The children, very high stats there. New immigrants are overrepresented. Children with disabilities are overrepresented. Racialized, or what used to be called visible minority, kids who may have been born here, but those families are also overrepresented in poverty stats. So again, you can see at play there, because the narrative around poverty is often, well, it's those families' choices, or they made some mistakes, or they could have worked harder, or all the excuses for that allow us to turn away and say, well, it's their problem, it's an individual problem, not our problem. When you look at who's overrepresented and such big identifiable groups, it makes it very stark that these are systemic issues. There's discrimination at work there. There's whether it's gender discrimination or racial discrimination or the legacy of residential schools and colonialism, whole range of issues that are manifest in those higher child poverty rates for those groups. And children with disabilities. Families have a tough time raising children with disabilities, sustaining work if they don't get enough support. So sometimes it's hard to have both parents work, or if you're a single parent, how do you sustain work? So there's a whole range of issues that make them more vulnerable as well. The other kind of a myth is that sometimes when people think child poverty, they think, well, that's families on welfare, that's families on income assistance. Not true, as Marie mentioned. A good third of them have parents working full-time, full year, which points to the wage issue. And others, a large majority of poor kids live with parents who work part-time during the year, part-year, precarious work. And they would like full-time work, but they have precarious or inadequate work to raise them above the poverty line, or their wages are low. So children on welfare in BC make up less than a quarter of the poor kids in the province. So just another thing to kind of wrap your head around. Sometimes people will quibble about the numbers. If you're interested in what poverty lines we're using, they're in a chart in the back of the full report card. You can see, because it's based on family size, etc. But sometimes I lose patience with quibbling over, well, you know, that 40,000 for a family of 4, that doesn't sound so low, or those kinds of arguments, because again, if you want to, I won't go through the numbers with you now, but if you look at the data in our report card on the depth of poverty, most families of any size, whether it's a single parent with 1 child, or a couple with 2 children, or single parent with 2 children, or whatever, most of them live over $10,000 below the poverty line, whichever poverty line fits their family configuration. So it's, you know, we're talking families that are living on $14,000 a year, $13,000 a year. That's the median actually below that those families, the depth of poverty for those. So that means some people are even below that. So they're living on very little money. So that's where I kind of lose patience with people who want to quibble about, well, that's not really poor. Well, somebody, you know, I think I always want to just say, you go live on that for a while and then we'll talk about it. Yeah. And the other thing, there's a lot of evidence in the report card, I don't have time to go through the numbers with you today, but that is the growth in income inequality. Huge driver of poverty. So because that's about money being sucked up into the 1%. So there's a great chart in here of the 1%. We actually couldn't put the We put the 0.1%, but we couldn't put the 0.01% on there because it would have gone off the page. But you can see the change over time in how the wealth of the very wealthy is growing astronomically fast. And the rest of us, the 90%, or you can break it up to the 99%, is either stagnating or going up this much or losing ground. So we have a growing income inequality problem. It's real, it's not something somebody made up, and the result is more and more families living in poverty. So why does all this matter? Why does growing income inequality matter? Why do high poverty levels matter? It matters because it's really bad for children's development. It's toxic for children's development. It's stressful for families. It has huge impacts on children's health, both in the immediate, and that could be food insecurity, poor housing, transience, and I'll get into stress in a minute, but just those health effects of poverty. Anybody heard the term epigenetics? It's another field of study that's fairly new in the last while, where they actually at the gene level can look at the expression of your genes. So this gets into prenatal health, postnatal health, pregnancy health. Genes can be turned on and off by the level of nutrition or stress that the mother feels. So there's fascinating studies of different outcomes using hamsters and rats and the whole thing they can look at with short lifespans. When they experience different levels of stress, different levels of nutrition, different levels of exposure to certain chemicals, there's a whole range of things. So how children's development is affected in particular by poverty and the stress that it causes. Really interesting research, well documented. So health, education is obviously affected. Children's ability to come to school ready to learn. As we say, school should be ready for the children, of course, but that's harder when they're harder and harder as they're underfunded. But children who come from chaos at home, whether it's familial, but especially when it's financial insecurity, so they didn't have a good place to study, they didn't have enough food, their parents were stressed because they were stressing over whether they could pay the rent or the hydro bill or that kind of thing. So all of that means that kids' opportunities when they come to school are foreshortened, sort of. They may not have books and access to internet and all kinds of things at home. So there's educational impacts, future employability. We know that illiteracy, which is one of the results of not doing well in school, leads that our prisons are full of people who have literacy problems. So there's something around criminal justice involvement there. Not to say all poor people become criminals, I don't mean to say that, but there's a statistical risk for young kids. And social cohesion, which I'm glad we'll be talking about tonight, because there's a huge issue around exclusion, the stigma that goes with being in poverty in a wealthy society. So in this very stratified society where a lot of, some people are doing really well, a lot of other people are hanging on in the middle and trying to look like they're doing okay, and then the people who can't even make it look like they're doing okay because they're not. They're really not able to keep up, because recreation often has to be purchased, maybe less so in Powell River than in the city, but access to recreation, those competence building involvement, and schools. I don't know what it's like here in the schools in Powell River, but a lot of places across the province, public schools even aren't as free as they used to be. So there's field trip fees, and parents have to fundraise, and so can you go on the field trip, or do you start to self-exclude? I'll give you a quick story, Melanie's story. It's a real story, a little girl in Richmond, BC. So she was 10 years old and it was swimming time, so everybody's gonna go swimming. Melanie doesn't have a swimsuit. And her single mother works, and as many kids do, they tell you at the last minute, oh, I need this for tomorrow. So on the weekend she tells her mom she needs a swimsuit, and her mom doesn't have time to go shopping. She also doesn't have has to wait for a paycheck to come before she could even think about buying a swimsuit for her. So the first day of the week, and this is a 5-day, you get swimming for 5 days. That week, that's the swimming week. So first day, she's sitting in the office. And what does she say? Because kids are cruel and she wants to keep her faith, so she says, oh, I don't really like swimming anyway. And then she stays home, and she goes, and her mom's like, no, okay, you can stay home this one day. Well, she ends up wandering to the mall, and she starts to think about, I'm foreshortening the story a bit just to make it quick, but I need a swimsuit. She looks at them, she thinks about lifting one, maybe she, but she doesn't. But there's the thought, I'm excluded because of this, maybe I could try to take a swimsuit. And it goes on. Meanwhile, her mom's frantic because she's not felt comfortable about leaving her home alone. She's called, she's not home, she's freaking out. So huge stress in the family for this whole week. By the end of the week, definitely Melanie's feeling excluded from her peers or teased because why didn't she go? And the story goes on to where what happened to my little 10-year-old who loved life and was happy and loved to go to school. Pretty soon she's got a chip on her shoulder. So I'm just giving you a quick picture, and all of you have probably seen this or heard of this kind of story, but it's very real for kids to be self-exclude or feel excluded by others because of their poverty. It's also another reason we should really care about this is that it's really expensive. All of those impacts I'm talking about, the long-term health, immediate and long-term, particularly long-term, chronic illness just maps against poverty like crazy. So as you get older, you're going to have higher rates of diabetes and chronic heart disease and a whole range of cancers. They just map right with the socioeconomic rating. So you're going to get higher healthcare costs. So we're paying for that. We're paying for the lost productivity. We're paying for justice system costs when it turns into that. We're paying for remedial education. We're paying for homelessness. All of those costs are huge, and so it's way more expensive to do that than to do the prevention, which is what we should be doing. And I'm glad there's a federal politician in the room tonight because there's things that the federal government can do. We have 21 or 2 recommendations in this report card this year, and we add to them every year, sort of. Most of them aimed at federal and provincial policy that would make a huge difference. So what are the solutions that we would propose? And I'm focusing here quickly on policy because it has the biggest impact. We recently had one policy win. Some of you may have heard about it. In the last while, we got the clawback of children's child support that was paid. That used to be deducted dollar for dollar from single parents on income assistance welfare checks. They were allowed finally to keep it. That affected 5,400 kids. And for some of them, it was a lot. It was $400 a month or something like that. And it made the difference between going to the food bank or not, or getting new shoes or not, or being able to go on the field trip or not. For some, it was $50 a month, but it made a difference. And there was a children's rights issue there too. Was it kids' money, and why were we taking it away? So policy advocacy is where First Call focuses a lot of its work because it has that. We could have worked for years as we create more and more poverty, one-on-one, trying to, and I don't mean to dump on any charitable efforts. They're necessary in the current time, but it will not solve the problem. We really need to look at the systemic solutions. So quickly, the high-level solutions that we would focus on and do focus on in our campaigning is childcare is one of the big ones. It's just way too expensive and too unavailable, and there's issues around quality. We have models all over the place, Quebec, Europe, where publicly funded, subsidized childcare with very low fees for parents or even no fees for parents are in place. This is doable. This is not, pie in the sky, we couldn't possibly do it. I noticed that Powell River City Council has endorsed the $10 a day childcare plan. Bravo. And lots of cities and school boards and organizations all around the province have, but we really need to keep building steam behind that campaign. It is doable and costed out and could be done tomorrow if we had the political will. Because it's one of the root causes. Why is there such high single parent poverty? Who can afford to work when you can't find or pay for or find a job that pays enough to pay for really expensive childcare? So it's just a loop there, let alone the benefits, especially for low-income children, of good quality, not just any childcare, quality childcare with an early childhood educator makes a difference for kids who may not have a lot going on at home in terms of extras and other opportunities. So those early experiences make a huge difference, and there's lots of research behind all of this. Housing is a huge issue. I know we're going to have another group on housing. Again, rental housing, I understand that high rents is a big issue here. Certainly housing of any kind is a huge issue in some parts of the province, accessing and being able to afford it. So at the provincial and federal level, there's probably a role we could talk about for municipal level support for things like co-ops and land swaps and how, what are the levers at the hands of municipal governments. But really, the big investments need to come from the federal and provincial governments. The federal government got out of giving money or supporting subsidized housing years ago, and we need those investments back, and from the provincial government. Living wages, there's a pamphlet I put on the table there. First Call hosts a Living Wage for Families campaign because we're not interested in just getting families to the poverty level. We want them over the poverty level, which is what living wages would provide. It's costed out at looking at what does it actually cost in a community to live out of chronic financial stress. So what does it cost for childcare? What does it cost for rental? What does it cost for food, healthy food? What does it cost for transportation? All those things get costed out, and those calculations in some places are done annually so that we can talk to both public and private employers about making that commitment to build a healthy community by paying living wages. And this is not a shaming campaign for small organizations or for nonprofits who are struggling with grants that keep shrinking. But it is a tool, an advocacy tool for nonprofits and even small employers to use to say, if I'm bidding on a government contract, this is what I need to pay my staff so that I'm not contributing, or we're not contributing to the problem. It's raising awareness of what does it actually cost to live in a community and what's required. And certainly at some levels, thinking the classic story is the provincial government and all the health authorities that contracted out their housekeeping and dietary staff years ago and dropped them from living wages to poverty level wages, created thousands of families living in poverty overnight through that. We're going to cost save by hiring these multinationals to come in, and on the cheap we'll do this. But in fact, it's creating costs, it's creating stress and all kinds of negative impacts that I've just been talking about for children and families immediately by doing that. So that was an irresponsible health decision that we should remediate at some point, and besides making them reorganize and try and get their wages back up incrementally year over year. And that's a public health issue. So this is a provincial issue there. Better public education funding. Who benefits best when public education can meet its mandate to offer a level playing field to all kids? Well, low-income kids benefit the most if they're not able to get extras and field trips and other opportunities at home. So we need public funding for better, to restore funding to public education because it's been hacked and chopped for years. On the income side, the policy things are, we've mentioned welfare. Welfare rates have not been raised since 2007, criminally low. Food banks have been institutionalized. Some of us with gray hair in the room remember when they didn't exist. Why do they exist now? Why are they normal? It's not okay to say that you can just go get charity over there. We really need people to be able to buy their own food, and there should be a reason, a good reason why welfare rates don't allow you to do that anymore, or they should be raised, is what I'm saying, both disability and welfare rates. We need living wages, I've talked about, so that's the other income piece. And then there's redistributive tax policies. So, always comes up, how are we going to pay for this? What's our tax regime? Who are we giving breaks to and who are we not giving breaks to? When we have flat taxes like NSP, I know they've just tinkered with it in the most recent budget, but that's a flat tax that disadvantages low-income and working families and costs nothing or is not even noticeable for those with very high incomes. So those kinds of total tax regimes need to be reviewed because that's how we take care of each other. Taxes are how we take care of each other and how we create healthy communities. So there's all kinds of, so for you as a community, what can you do? These are policy issues that need to be taken up. There are campaigns around many of these things in BC, so you can support the Fight for 15 campaign. That's the minimum, get the minimum wage up. You can support the childcare campaign, the $10 a day childcare campaign. You can get behind these and because when you go out and talk to your neighbors or wherever you link in the community, do they know about these things? Have they added their voice? Because a lot of times advocacy is all around giving politicians permission to do what they see as publicly supported. They need to know they have that permission. Whichever party they come from, they need to know they have that you support them to do the right thing. So that's the duty of citizenship. So there are some good campaigns and proposals and that you can get behind on those issues, certainly wages, living wages. I would challenge your council to think about becoming a living wage employer. We'd be happy to work with you. I'm happy to talk about what that looks like. It doesn't mean everybody in Powell River has to pay a living wage. It means as an employer, the city of Powell River has to pay a living wage to its direct staff, and probably most of them are already there.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, are already there. So that's not, so it might be your contracts. So usually we're trying to get the light to shine on contracts, might be cleaning, might be security, those kinds, whatever might be contracted. And there's certain thresholds, and when we certify employers, there's thresholds that we make sure it's not ridiculous. It's not the courier who shows up once every 2 months or something, but that somebody who actually works for you on contract for a certain, at least 10 hours a month or 120 hours a year is captured in that. So we're trying to raise the floor there in certain industries in particular. So I'd love to have that conversation and share some, because we're working with New Westminster already certified, Vancouver's made the commitment to certify, Port Coquitlam has just passed a motion that so we're working closely with all those cities to help it. And once they do it, they're usually quite happy to share their experience about how they made it work. And some big employers like Van City that have been certified as living wage employers have been fantastic about sharing their experience, how they handled contract issues and things like that. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. I mean, when we get into talking to the groups, other kinds of solutions. You talked about childcare. I don't know, Marie. That's childcare is an expensive enterprise. So cities can, I think, and schools can provide space, can perhaps help with capital or something. But operating a childcare, I think it needs the federal and provincial investments. Just so you know, at the national level or at the BC level. Like there's a UNICEF benchmark that says we should be investing at least 1% of our GDP into the early years, into supporting early care and education in young kids. And BC invests about 0.29, so not even a third of a percent. And Canada's about there, I think they're even less, because ours went up a little bit when we did all-day K, because that gets counted. So all-day kindergarten upped it from 0.25 to 0.29 or something. But it's a really, and so again, thinking, children are only young once. I don't know how many times you've heard with some frustration, I certainly have, our current government say, we'd love to do more when we can, when LNG comes in, when whatever. Been through this for many years. Unless there's the political will, it will never be the right time. We have surplus governments, we've had deficit governments, and it's never been the right time. Right now we've just had a surplus budget passed. Instead it was the time to put some money into a prosperity fund or to give more money back on the carbon tax, or there's a whole range of things that have happened. And kids, so if child poverty is your issue in this city and you want to organize some action around that, and I'd suggest a working group. I know you probably all are a million working groups, but a lot of the Poverty Reduction Coalition that First Call is also part of, we're working to try and get local poverty reduction committees going, or if it works to have it around child and youth committees. You have a pretty active Success by Six table. I think they're a little constrained because they're partly government funded to get to do really pointed advocacy that seems to be critical of government, whatever the government of the day is. But I think focusing on young children and saying we are underinvesting. We have lots of tools we can share with you and research to make that easy. And looking at those key pieces like income supports and housing and childcare are ways you can have a role. You should be aware right now that the provincial government has a particular focus right now on, in some ways, downloading onto municipalities. Maybe this is not news to you. So so they've published a pamphlet recently about municipal barriers to setting up childcare. And in our dialogue, we run an early childhood roundtable that dialogues with government on this all. And we said that's the big issue, that municipal governments are the problem. The problem is it costs parents an arm and a leg. The problem is that there's not enough spaces. And when they are there, people can't afford them. So those are the big issues. If we're going to solve the childcare access problem, let's look at what the real barriers are, not if this municipal bylaw or that municipal bylaw is making, work on that, but that's not the big issue. So those are the kinds of dialogues we need with government, because sometimes they also waste our money. They almost started to put in a childcare online registry recently, and we talked to them about that and said, what's the value? Have you looked at this in other places? It had a huge price tag. And so we really pushed back on that and said, this is not solving the crisis. So parents can go online and find out that they're on long wait lists, or there's a bunch of childcare they can't afford. That is not helping, and the money invested is going to be wasted. And you already support childcare resource and referral centers all around the province that have a handle on where they are and when parents can access information. So why are you wasting this money? And they actually listened a bit and have scaled it back to they're just going to update the childcare maps they already have online, and they're going to, they scaled it back by several $100,000, and they won't set up a new thing. So sometimes we just have to be really vocal and be on them about what they're doing, and offer offer solutions. We're here to help you, so that's the role of citizens. We're here to help you do the right thing. We're here with some suggestions. And we're not going to accept, especially in the early years, what I call fairy dust funding. You know, here's a little bit, here's 30,000 for you, and here's 30,000 for you. Meanwhile, young children in this province have no entitlement to a family resource program, to childcare. There's no entitlement like there is for K-12, at least. If you get grade 2, you get grade 2, right? And if there's more grade 2 kids show up, then you get to open another class. If you show up at a family resource program and it's full, or a Strong Start program and it's full, you get nothing. You go home, come back another day, and nobody opens up a new program for you. So we need to think about the entitlement that children should have in those early years, because that's the most important years. I'll stop right. Thank you very much.
Can I get away if I just say ditto? My name is Lyn Adamson. I'm the Executive Director of PrEP. I need this microphone. If I take it away, can you hear me? No. Okay. It's a big room. I was asked to come and speak a bit about some of the programs that PrEP is doing, which is definitely not comprehensive to the programs in the community, and a little bit from what we see through the lens of some of the programs that we do. I'm not an expert on child poverty by any means, but in some of what I'm going to tell you, I know that many of you in the room, and it's going to not be new news for you, but maybe it will help to frame the discussions that we're going to have in a few minutes. I'm going to look at my clock every now and then to try and make sure that I stay somewhere near my time. So what is being done in Powell River right now? Well, I'm a cup half full person, so I think Powell River is a great town. We've got some wonderful and great and caring people, and really intelligent and with it people, many of whom are in this room tonight on Tuesday night, coming out from 7 to 9 of your own free will to look at a problem that's in your community. And I believe from the desk I have that we have some excellent services in our community. For a small town, I'm constantly amazed at the skill of the people and the dedication of the people that are working in our area. So we've got some great services. But as I was reflecting on kind of what we could talk about tonight, I am going to talk about the services we offer and some of the things that are happening, but services don't put money in people's pockets. And so services, doesn't matter how good we are at Family Place, we're not paying the rent for these people. And so that's where there's a problem between the good services we can offer and the true problem. So when I was looking at some of the math, the biggest problem I could see from the last good stats we have in 2010 is that the before average tax income in Powell River, this is in your vital signs book, was $71,000, $71,700, right? So $72,000, we'll make it easy for math. You compare that to the BC average, which is $92,000. So that to me, when you're looking at the math, we're $20,000 per family less than the other Joes in BC. And that to me is a problem that services are going to have a hard time addressing. Right? And we need to figure out how to put more change into people's pockets. However, I was asked to speak about services, and I will, because I do think that they help to alleviate the problem. The services we're offering our community help people make connections. They help provide resources. They help provide education. So I was going to provide a quick overview of some of the things we do in the prep programs. Annabelle Tully-Barr is sitting over here. She's one of our key staff members at Family Place. And Family Place serves all sorts of families with preschool age children. Some are living in poverty, some are not. And that's one of the magic things that happens at Family Place is hopefully those families come and they hang out together and they're able to share resources with each other. So the people that may be struggling a bit more could maybe get to know some people who aren't struggling and observe and watch how they're parenting and maybe get some skills from both the staff but also from each other. So when we chat more about community cohesion later on today, I want to give a couple examples of things that I see from my desk that are working. That if we could find ways to make them work more, it doesn't really take a lot more dollars, it just takes more connections. The Community Resource Center is another one of those places. It serves anybody in the community that wants to walk through the doors. Its target group is marginalized people, but we don't have a poster for that. It helps people, again, just to make connections primarily, to deal with people who are in crisis or maybe in severe poverty, maybe people who are highly isolated, and they get together and they help each other. And I've got a couple stories for you later in my presentation about that. A couple other programs that PrEP offers. We offer a program called Bond, which is a nutritional program. And in that one, we do put a little bit of money, about $60 per month, into people's pockets to help them buy nutritious food when they're pregnant or when they have young children up to the age of 6 months. They learn nutrition, how to eat nutritiously, how to buy food on a budget. We operate a program called YAC, the Young Adult Community Kitchen, which is dealing now with teenagers. And also it's a food-based program, but it's based on building connections, much more than the food that they eat or take home. The food's a supplement. It brings people out because many marginalized kids are also kind of hungry on a Friday night or a Monday night, so they come for the food attraction. And then CareerLink is a program, I'm going to give you some stats on it a little bit too. Serves anybody who's unemployed that wishes to walk through the doors to get accesses in the community. A smaller program that we do that was mentioned though in Adrienne's report is we do also run a program called Powell River Immigrant Services. And we do find that a number of our new immigrants to our community have young children. And because they can't do the jobs that they did in countries previous to coming to Canada, usually because they just don't have good enough English to get into those jobs, they often end up getting thrown into minimum wage jobs while raising young children. And we've got a number of those in the community right now working at low-income restaurant jobs or fast food outlets who honestly have much higher educations and we're just struggling to get their English up to a level where they can apply for meaningful work. And then there's a ton of other programs in the community being offered by a whole bunch of people actually that I see in the room right here. The school district runs a number of really good programs, including a lot of food programs, breakfast programs, lunch programs, Strong Start. Success by Six and the Orca Bus run out by the United Way. Child, Youth and Family Services run some great programs. Inclusion Powell River is expanding their program offerings all the time. I see Rita sitting in the back of the room. And Rita's been working really hard with basically all the groups that I just mentioned and a couple of representatives from Sahaman to try and figure out how do we break down some of the, I would call them silos, I guess. How do we break down the program barriers between the various things that we all offer so that we can create better programming together, and where are the true gaps in the services between what we all offer so that we can try and fill those gaps. And it's hard to do in a small town because you might have one person who's on 4 different wait lists. So they sound like 4 different people, but it's just one person. And so we're trying to be really careful to make sure that when we come out with suggested solutions for early years, that it's meaningful and that it's rather measured, and not because we're all dying to do yet another research study on let's look at the poor. But with limited dollars, I was saying the story the other day that it's tempting sometimes to get an idea and just jump at it and say, hey, if I had $60,000, I could do this. But after you start doing that thing, even if it's only serving 20 or 30 people, those 20 or 30 people are devastated if you take it away. So it's really important for us that we work hard to figure out when we go and suggest ideas on how to consolidate our early years programs, that we're doing it in a meaningful way, because we know that the dollars are going to be limited and we're only going to get 1 or 2 shots of trying to build new programs if that's what it is to serve folks. I do want to say though, if we were able to fix the root problem, which is that the family was not poor, a whole bunch of our programs wouldn't have to be enhanced to the way they are. So for prep, and I suspect that it's similar for the school district and some of the other community partners I mentioned, we are constantly finding that we're spending more money on things like food, Annabelle, because people are coming to Family Place because they are hungry. And we're noticing this way more than we did in previous years. So at Career Link, we always have a muffin jar out. At CRC, we're constantly finding ways to try and feed people more because people are coming hungry. And so it's a growing problem in the community. So I wanted to give you a little bit of stats from Career Link's desk on just what does that look like for us. So last year we posted 1,468 jobs. Honestly, folks, in Powell River, that's awesome. Right? That's way more. Like in the year 2009, remember that terrible, terrible year? I think we had, at one point, 11 jobs on the job board. And right now we'll have about 90 jobs on the job board. And so that's a good sign for our economy. The difficulty is that 55% of those jobs are in the $12 an hour range. Okay, so the vast majority of the jobs that we are posting are in the services industry. So food, accommodations, retail. And so just to do some math for you, to add some meat to what Adrienne was saying in Powell River context, if you're working for $12 an hour at 35 hours a week, you're making about $850 every 2 weeks, every paycheck. That's your gross. You take off your taxes, about $170 that you pay to CPP and EI and all those dudes, and you're walking home with $679 every 2 weeks. Okay. If that turns out to be in $17,659, so let's call it $18,000 per year, right? Is what our average person out there working 35 hours a week at $12 an hour is making. That's $1,471 a month. Childcare in our community for one child, preschool child, is about $800 a month. So is it worth it to work? Our two largest expenses that people tell us when we do their budgets are food and rent. I think all of us can see what's happening in the grocery stores to the price of food lately. They're just going up astronomically. And I asked Roger Pagani from Royal LePage to give me some recent stats, like today's stats on what our rental prices are. So as of today, he believes our vacancy rate in the community is 1%. Yeah, that's crazy. I did a quick thing through the BC Tenancy Act, folks, and Powell River's at 1%. Even Nanaimo's at 2%. So something's happened where we've really gone down. Campbell River's at 3%. Courtney's a little bit lower than us at 0.6, but up until a couple of years ago, we were running 6%, 7% vacancy rate. So just in the last couple of years, we've really dived down, and our prices, because of that, are really going up. So our average one bedroom in our community is now $600. And I can tell you it was $5 and change a couple of years ago. A two bedroom, $750 to $900. And welfare rates have not moved, as Adrienne said, in 8 years. So the welfare rate for a single person is $675 for your shelter. Our average one bedroom shelter is $600.
No, it's $375 for shelter.
Sorry, what did I say?
$675.
I'm sorry, it's $375 for shelter, and the average one bedroom is $600.
Wow.
So it's just not keeping up with what our needs are in the community. So in my humble opinion, what needs to happen? Well, if it's worth saying once, let's say it again. My top 4 things, and I wrote this before Adrienne said hers: increase welfare rates. We see that over and over, that it's just not keeping up. We need to increase the minimum wage. We need to create affordable childcare. In my opinion, from years of working in the employment field, we need to increase access to education. Low-income people have the worst access to education, and we know that higher education helps alleviate poverty and brings people out of poverty. I am a cup half full person. I do want to tell you about a new program the BC government has initiated called the Single Parent Employment Initiative. For the first time in my 20-some years working in employment, we are allowed to take a person, a single parent, mother or father, on income assistance and help them access education, post-secondary education.
Whoa.
So this is a new program. It's only come out since September. We can't send a person to university, but we can send them to vocational courses and cover a great deal of their costs. The caveat is we can't increase their living. So they still have to figure out how to live on their welfare rates with shelter rates that are very low, and it's hard to eat. However, we can pay their tuition and we can help pay some of their other secondary costs, and the welfare people will let them go to school, where previously they had to be looking for work.
Right.
Only a
So-
12-month program though, right?
It's a, well, we can leverage up to about 24
Are they letting you
months.
be a little
We can
bit-
be, but they're calling this a successful program, which means that they're moving the bar all the time to
Okay.
try and get more people in. So it's not awesome, but it's better than what we've had for years. And I can tell you, we've got some single parents that are actively looking at whether they can return to school while living on very, very, very low income, and whether they can leverage some help with their family or friends or whatever to do that.
And they'll pay their childcare.
And we will pay their childcare. So tuition's you paid, books and stuff are paid, childcare paid, so some other expenses to help people get back to school. So it's a great program. We just haven't had a chance to have much uptake on it yet. Okay, locally, I just wanted to tell you two stories. I have a whole bunch of cute little ideas, but the two that I wanted to share were both stories that happened at the CRC. One of the things that happens at the Community Resource Centre when we talk about housing is because of the atmosphere that happens in there is people help each other. So they do things that if we had a housing advocate, which I'd love to have, don't get me wrong, working out of the Community Resource Centre, but they would have to go to the rental apartments and find the regular standard places that I just told you about. They're averaging $600 a month or $650. What happens at the Resource Centre, because of the community cohesion, is people sitting beside each other will go, okay, Russ, well, you know, for 3-4 weeks you can come and stay at my place. And they help each other out. And that might be all Russ needs to get going till he gets his first paycheck and he can get himself out of the bad situation he's in. So that type of thing happens. And one of my favorite stories of that is people that came to see us shortly after we opened. And they had just had a baby, like just a baby was about 2 days old. They didn't have a place to stay. They were couch surfing. And the ministry took their child away until they found a place to stay. That was the deal, because they didn't have a stable place for this child to stay. They came into the resource center, and me and one of the staff, we basically dropped everything to figure out how could we find a place. And we started phoning everybody we knew to find a place to stay. Meanwhile, the couple sits in the coffee shop area and is hanging out with people, and people are giving them support, and they're helping them out, which was really nice. The next morning, somebody comes in with a plastic bag. They said, "This is for that mom, you know, that was here yesterday." And I said, "Great," and set it aside. And I figured it's probably some clothes or something for the baby or whatever. Now I'm going to choke up, and most of you know me, don't know I don't do that very often. And so I look in the bag a few minutes later, and it was a breast pump.
Oh, wow.
And this mom had figured out that this other mom was going to need to start pumping real fast if she was going to be able to nurse that baby that she had said was a concern for hers when she was sitting chatting with those other people,
Wow.
and had brought her a piece of apparatus so that she could do that.
Wow.
So, and that's something that government people, I'm not a government employee, but even a nonprofit employee, we just didn't have that context to think that way. We're like, find them a house. But the resources based in the community, we're looking at the whole picture. So, yeah, that story had a good outcome. It took us about 3-4 days. We found them a place to live. They got their baby back, and I won't say that their life was rosy, but at least it moved out of the crisis stage that it was in at that time. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to kind of say about that stuff. I'm going to be at a table on community cohesion later, and we can talk more about those types of ideas. Over to Russell.
Right, well, thanks very much. Murray introduced me as a politician. I'm one of 5 city councillors in the room, so please heckle all 5 of us if you want to heckle a councillor. And if we can spread out once we go to tables, that'd be great. So there's good resource, and any one of them could have been up here giving you the municipal context. So by no means am I an expert on child poverty, but I can give some local government municipal context. That's what I'm hoping to do. And it flows well from these two here. So some context, it's estimated that about 8 cents of every tax dollar goes to local government. So that means the other 92 cents on that dollar are going to the provincial and federal levels. And that 8 cents is supposed to be used for providing what we typically understand to be core services, right? Water treatment, sewer, garbage, police and fire protection, public transit, and increasingly recreation and cultural services. And you've all heard us talking about how we've got an infrastructure deficit. So you've heard us talking about a sewer treatment plant. You've heard us talking about replacing our water main. And we certainly hear about roads all the time. In 55, the federal government accounted for about 34% of capital investment. By 2003, that had dropped to about 13%. Local government's share has increased in that time from 27 to 48. And you all know the state of our infrastructure. A lot of it was built in the 50s, early 60s, and it's all getting to the end of its life cycle. Now, with that context, obviously, increasingly we've got responsibilities and costs being transferred to local government without new resources or the funding to support them. We're being required to pick up the slack in funding for housing, mental health, addiction, and social services. And those needs are real. And local government is the direct first local government that sees those needs. Didn't want to go there, but I can't help it. I can't help but think it's not a families first agenda we're seeing, it's a fracking first agenda. The role for local government, I want to touch on largely three things we can address. One is advocacy with the provincial and federal governments, and that was addressed by Adrienne. That's a very critical role. Secondly, we can include objectives, policies, and directions that are based on input and vision by the community and various plans we put in place. So official community plans, integrated community sustainability plans, and those help us, they guide us in making decisions on planning and land use management. The third level, which was also touched on, is we need to collaborate with other agencies and organizations to help deliver and leverage existing services. So some of our social, cultural, recreation programming services. If we can't all implement those in silos, if we work with school district, charitable organizations, other levels, we can deliver those better. Now, so I'm going to go through those three things. What does advocacy look like? What does it mean when we say advocacy? So never underestimate the power of some good advocacy from the local government to the provincial and federal level. We've got, advocacy can look like a motion just at city council, a motion on some issue of importance. And don't rely on your city councillors to bring forward ideas. If you've got an idea, you say, city council should do something, take the 10 minutes delegation at a council meeting, put the time into presenting something. That's usually when the best ideas come forward. It's when people come to local government. There's representative organizations like AVICC, which is Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities. Then there's UBCM, which is Union of BC Municipalities. There's also FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So we can bring forward motions and advocacy initiatives from our level to those representative organizations and push for change at the higher levels. Increasingly what I've seen, and I've heard folks with much more than my 4 years on local government say, is that there's a larger and larger disconnect every year between what local government's priorities are and what provincial and federal government priorities are. So that's telling me that the policies and initiatives at those levels are not reflecting the priorities at the local level. So we need to keep pushing on that advocacy front. And just some examples of advocacy motions. Adrienne mentioned that $10 a day childcare. We did support that one at the council level. We've also, and these go back about 10 years now, there were various motions on, pushing back on the provincial government when they were talking about changes to Employment and Assistance Act. We signed on to a critical one. BC is one of only 2 provinces now, I think, without a poverty reduction plan. So
We're the last.
are we the last now? Yeah. So so at the local level, that was council brought those motions forward in the last 10 years. Last time was in 2012. But also at the UBCM level, so the provincial level for advocacy, in 2014 there were 2 motions endorsed by municipal governments from across the province. One calling for the provincial government to create and implement a poverty reduction plan, as well as set aside the resources to support the plan. And also a motion on child poverty, requesting the provincial government adopt a comprehensive poverty reduction plan with legislated targets and timelines, and a goal to eradicate child poverty in BC by 2020. So these are critically important, these motions passed at UBCM. This is how we advocate to the provincial, federal levels. Listen, this is what the people are telling us in our community. This is what we're hearing. We deal with this every day. Action is required on these. Now, the second point I made was including policies and directions in community plans. What does that look like? So there's certain things we can't implement at the local government level, but there's a number we can make things a little bit easier. And this is where we also rely on everyone in the community to be creative. If there's something you think that might be possible, contact one of your councillors, contact staff. Sometimes there's ways to work around this. Sometimes it takes a little bit of advocacy with other agencies to make it happen. For example, on housing, it needs to be affordable and appropriately located. We can address those in plans. The city did put a homelessness strategy. I know Councillor Hathaway and Councillor D at the time were involved in that. There's movement afoot to put in place a social policy framework. There's potential for tax incentives, structuring tax regimes to support low-income housing. We need to ensure age-friendly and disability-friendly considerations in planning. Food and agriculture is a big one, and you heard it from both Lyn and Adrienne. That needs to be a priority for local government. You're starting to hear more about that. There's a community food assessment being done. Hopefully from that will stem some policy work. Right now there's a gap there. Food policy is kind of missing from the local government policy framework. It needs to be embedded in there. Land use is another one. Public transportation is important to make it accessible and affordable. Increasingly, services for health, education, and social needs. There's options there for local government to provide tax exemptions for various organizations, which we do. But that's one means to make it easier for those organizations to provide services. Also, it was alluded to, social and cultural participation. So opportunities for all ages and cultures, making programming accessible and inclusive. There's roles there, for example, through the recreation complex and programming that the city provides, potentially in partnership with school district and others. And I know increasingly that's being looked at in the school district, and city staff are working on that. The third point I made was about collaborating with other agencies and organizations. You may have heard about the work that PREP's doing, or PRDI, tapping the groundswell. That's critically important. When this new council came in, one of the things we were all gung-ho on getting to work on was getting a social policy framework in place and probably a social action and policy advisory committee. Tapping the groundswell, the work they're doing will largely deliver a social plan, and I'm hoping that'll be the springboard for local government to take action. From that, I'm also hoping that maybe we'll establish a community advisory committee to provide feedback on social issues, including poverty. Now, I just want to give you an idea. Just about a year ago now, we drafted a terms of reference for a social policy advisory committee. Just want to give you an idea of what it looks like. A number of communities have done this now. I think it's a great way to pull together those different groups to liaise. That's what's lacking often, is different organizations and local government talking to each other to get a sense of what they're doing. And here's what we were thinking at the time: to advise and make recommendations to council on policies, priorities, new initiatives, and direction to enhance the social needs, social well-being, and social development of the community; to facilitate communication and collaboration amongst community organizations, to support them to work together on community social challenges and opportunities. That is happening to a certain extent. It's not always, it can't be the role of local government to make all these things happen, but they definitely have a role in pulling people together. I know everyone groans when you say we're going to establish another committee, but sometimes I think we need to do that to get people talking. And we wanted the development of a social policy framework to provide an opportunity for the community to identify key policy directions, priorities, roles, and expectations. Some ideas around membership that we talked about: 4 members of council, someone from Tlaiamin Regional District, 12 community members to include representatives of community groups, organizations, or social agencies, and 3 community citizens selected from the community at large. So I think sometimes these groups where you have broad membership from a number of organizations can be really powerful. Often there's a lot going on, it's just a matter of coordinating and sharing what's working, what's not working. Now, I also jotted down what some of take-home messages for Powell River and potential initiatives that I've heard other councillors mention, that have been reported on coming back from conferences or workshops or things that we've already been talking about and working on. And it's funny, they echo what we've heard here a little bit. Continue to advocate to the province for a poverty reduction plan. I think that's a critical missing piece. And there's only so many times you can bring that to UBCM. I think it has to come from citizens as well, not just local government, because we get typically the same stock answer back from the province. Consider adopting a living wage policy. I think you heard that twice, and you heard it a third time, so I suspect you'll probably see someone move on that. Consider adopting a social procurement policy. That's another thing we've just brought forward. You can, in your procurement policies, not only does it have to be, best price, best quality, but if you can insert other requirements in your procurement that help leverage delivering social programming, why not? So a number of organizations, local governments are starting to be a little bit creative in how they're structuring those. There's always, you gotta be a little bit careful because we're subject to interprovincial trade agreements, national trade agreements, increasingly larger, more scary perhaps trade agreements. So we need to be creative with these social procurement policies. Consider establishing a social action and policy advisory committee. We want to do that. Work on implementing the actions outlined in our ICSP. So if you haven't had a chance to look at our integrated community sustainability plan, there are a number of action items in there that touch on what we're talking about. We'll touch on what we'll be talking about on the tables. Take a look at some of those. If you're really passionate about some of them, pick it up and champion it in the community and hold us to account. We can, this is a big one for me, review plans and zoning with consideration to promotion of food production. I think this is a big missing piece in Powell River. I alluded to it earlier. Everyone sort of points to everyone else. Well, we can't do something, they can't do something, but we really need to address food production in Powell River. If we're only producing 2 to 3% local food, not just producing it, making sure it's accessible. As we've heard, food is a missing piece as well as wages, so we can do so much better locally on the food piece. And supporting integration of food policy into municipal policy frameworks to help meet other objectives. And I think I'd like to see us establish a food policy council as well. So it's not just establishing the committees that'll get some movement on some of these things, it's getting people together around the table talking about these issues that will help move us forward on them. I think that's it. I just wanted to set a little bit of local government context to help inform the discussions around the table. But the big piece is there's 5 of us here. There's also a federal MP. Oh, well, maybe she's standing up. And we also have provincial MLA rep here, really, right? Yay. Right, so hold us to account. I really want to encourage people getting engaged. If there's an issue or something you see as a solution, bring it forward to council. Not just council, bring it forward to regional district as well. This is another piece. Increasingly, I see a greater role for the regional district and the city working together to help deliver some programming. And some of these solutions might be obviously regional in nature. Regional district might be the best place for that. So if you're going to present to City Council, present to Regional District as well. Thanks.
Of course, the politician word was a good word, as I used it.
Right.
Thanks so much. What a great panel. Another round of applause for these folks. And the point was made by Russell and others. I mean, the job of citizens is to create the space for city councilors, politicians, or whatever you want to refer to them as, to do the stuff they already want to do. And because, it's one thing getting a good city council elected. It's not so easy for them just to do all the stuff we want them to do. There's all kinds of pressures on city council to not do this stuff. And so it's the job of social movement organizations like Powell River Voices and just ordinary citizens to create that space so that City Council has that mandate. The mandate isn't just the day after the election. The mandate is every day. and the more that we can provide this city council with that mandate.